And on you go.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the latest edition of the Gersnet Podcast, brought to you in association with Forest Precision Engineering. My name is Ben Harshaw, and I will be the host for this evening. So this is the Rangers podcast that is made by fans for fans, and where the content, as always, is completely free. Before I introduce my two guests this evening, I just want to give another shout out to our sponsors. And again, they are Forest Precision Engineering. They have been a sponsor of Rangers for a number of years now, and we are delighted that yet again they are back in our podcast. If you would like to find out a little bit more information about them, please go to their website at www.forestprecisioneng.com. They also have a executive lounge within the main stand at Ibrox. And for more information on that, please email the club at hospitality@rangers.co.uk. And we would encourage you to share the pod on all your social medias. We're live tonight, as always, on YouTube. We also, of course, have our forums at GeorgeNet where you can get the latest on all of your Rangers news, and there is plenty and plenty and plenty to discuss. So, without further ado, introducing my two guests, and first joining me is Brian Archer. And Brian, I'm not quite sure if this is the final episode of last season or the first of next season. We're kind of in limbo, but how are you?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what we call it to be honest, but I'm kind of enjoying the break from football nonetheless. I've quite grown to kind of enjoy the summer months when I don't feel like I need to watch so much football. So especially given the football that we've watched over recent seasons, when you get to the kind of end of the season, you feel like you enjoy the break. But all good. How's yourself?
Yes, good, good. It's been a busy Rangers week, so I'm looking forward to getting in and chatting to it. Yeah, chatting about it. And also joining me is Scott Bradley. Scott, how's things with yourself?
I'm very well, mate. I'm over the moon that we've got a manager in, and I'm fully on board the Russell Martin hype train. Like, obviously, we'll get into it, but yeah, I'm just glad we got someone in because see that managerial search, it was getting beyond tedious. I was sick of talking about it, but now let's just kick on.
Yep, onwards and upwards, as I say. So although it's sort of almost old news now, the takeover, Brian, I think it would be remiss not to not spend too much time on it as there's been further developments as we well know in terms of manager, and we're going to focus mostly on that. But what were your thoughts on the takeover? It's long been muted that it was going to happen, and of course, experts across the city told us that it wasn't going to happen. But were you relieved or were you optimistic? What was your feelings once we got across the line, Brian?
Quite relief that it's finally done. I think it's obviously been talked about for months now. I think we were all just eager to kind of get the final kind of I's dotted and T's crossed and get it all signed off, and then we kind of know where we stand. I think at the minute, you've got to be optimistic about it. It can only be a positive thing. It was definitely needed, that kind of fresh impetus, and not just the investment. Obviously, there's been a lot made about the initial £20 million investment, but what I'm almost more excited about is the kind of connections that a group like the 49ers Enterprises could bring with them in terms of they've got access to an American market. You're looking at potential sponsors that they could bring. They've obviously got a much wider connection than maybe kind of local based businessmen do. So I think that is, to me, almost just as important as the financial aspect. And I think that could be what really drives us on to the next level. So I think, yeah, it's definitely a positive and definitely much needed.
Yeah, and sticking with yourself, Brian, this managerial appointment or head coach, I should say, of Russell Martin wasn't necessarily what we all largely wanted as fan base. Did that appointment dampen some of that optimism, or where do you sit with that?
So I'll be honest, when it first kind of was mooted that he was the likely candidate, I think it was for Fabrizio Romano that initially kind of broke the story that it was looking like it was going to be him. I was pretty disappointed he wouldn't have been my choice. I was kind of underwhelmed, I think it's fair to say. But to be honest, as the days have went on and as we've had the press conference and we'll to talk about that in more detail, I wouldn't say I'm quite coming round to the idea, but at the end of the day, we've kind of got to accept it now. He's the man the board have chosen. We give him our backing as we would any manager, and we've just got to see and hope that he can put the ideas he talks about, he can put them into practice. The one thing I will say is, in terms of a new board coming in, it shows some kind of, what you would call it, some kind of, real strength from them to appoint him. It would have probably been easier for the board to look at the fan reaction and say, no, let's go with somebody else. But the fact that they've actually went with him despite the reaction online probably shows a bit about their mentality and their character, that they're not afraid to make maybe what could be seen as unpopular decisions if they feel it's the right decision. He's obviously went through a fairly lengthy interview process, and we've got to assume that he's impressed at every stage of that. So they obviously strongly believe that he's the man. And well, that's the case. We've just got to back him.
Yeah, yeah. No, Scott, that's an interesting point that Brian makes there. And it's one that I agree with in terms of the board being brave in a way that I think it is the easier thing to just take what the fans are telling you to take. And I think that's where we've gone wrong. I mean, obviously, I'm not speaking on everyone, but largely the fan base wanted Gio. It didn't work out. Okay, we got the European final, but Gio was not the man to be domestically winning us things. And then the fans, again, myself included, at the time thought Michael Beale was the man. And well, the less said about that, the better. So, where do you stand on it? And do you agree that they've shown that they're going to do what they feel is right for the football club? It could be, it's brave. They especially just coming in, they may have taken the easy route and decided, oh, let's get the fans loving us and go where they want to go, which by this stage I suppose was Ancelotti. But there's risk with both. But do you agree on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm actually glad the board ignored the fans, because the fans have got so much wrong in the past. Like as you said, Michael Beale, Van Bronckhorst, Clement as well. So I think the board were actually going to go for Lampard. Then there was a massive amount of backlash online, and then they opted for Clement. And obviously, Graham Souness told the board to go for Lampard, and for whatever reason, they ignored him. Baffling to me. But yeah, in terms of the appointment of Russell Martin, I was the same as Brian when the news broke on Tuesday. I was annoyed. I was deflated. I was like, really? Like, we sacked Clement like 100 odd days ago, and this is the best we can come up with. Then I slept on it, and I was like, you know what? They went for Russell Martin. He's their guy. Would I have appointed him? No. But he's here now, and Rangers fans need to back him. I think the reaction online from some Rangers fans has been embarrassing. Like, seriously, Rangers fans saying they're giving up their season ticket, no going back to Ibrox, and it's just laughable, really, it really is. Because the guy's just in the door, and then people are just like being so negative. Like, it's almost like these people want Martin to fail so they can be like, "Oh, I told you so." But in terms of Russell Martin, since he's came in the door and his interviews and his press conferences, I've been really impressed. I've been really, really impressed. I think his press conference was a 10 out of 10 for me. Very articulate, very honest, very likeable, down to earth. Now, I don't think he's anything like Michael Beale. I think obviously Michael Beale was just a very fake person. Whereas if anybody watched the Russell Martin Gary Lineker podcast, he won me over with that. I really, really want him to do well. So yeah, I think all Rangers fans need to stop being negative, because see, being negative constantly, it's only going to benefit one team, and that's Celtic. So we need to get behind him. And of course, if he is struggling, you know, he's not a daft guy. He's came into this club knowing, right, he needs to win. It's not a project, none of that garbage. He needs to come in and win. If he doesn't win anything next season, he's out the door, because Rangers can't afford to give Rangers time anymore. Gerrard was allowed it because he inherited a bigger mess than what Martin's inheriting, right? So, and obviously it was Gerrard's first season as a manager. So we're like, okay, give him time. And his first season, he's seen progress, he's seen improvement. And then obviously it worked out because he won 55. So yeah, I'm fully on board with Russell Martin, and I would love nothing more for him to go out and prove me and the naysayers wrong.
Yep. No, I mean, at the end of the day, success for Russell Martin is success for Rangers, and we're all aligned for the same goals now, or we should be. It's almost as if some, and you know what online's like, but it's almost as if some actually prefer when we're failing, so they have something to moan about and complain about. It's just not a mentality that I can understand, but to each their own. So Brian, we'll touch more on the press conference and how he spoke and stuff a little bit later on, but just on the appointment itself. Given that, and again, we're touching on the press conference here, but given that it was said in the press conference that he was the obvious candidate from the start, from the get go. I know there's circumstances as to why this is the case, but did you feel, given that he was supposedly the outstanding candidate and the obvious candidate, do you feel like this took too long? I know maybe the takeover factors into that, but do you feel if he was the obvious that we could have got this done a week ago or earlier?
I think perhaps, yeah. I think it's kind of, obviously we don't know the kind of inner workings and what's going on and who's been interviewed and who's not been interviewed. But just based on what's out there in the press, it was first reported, I think, that Ancelotti was the favoured candidate. The kind of, when his name first came out and we all kind of started to look into, this assistant from Real Madrid and stuff like that, and we kind of read the quotes from previous players and all that sort of stuff. And he seemed to be the favoured candidate. And then it went to Steven Gerrard. All of a sudden, he shot to being the favourite candidate. And then it kind of flipped back to Ancelotti. And then it emerged that, no, Russell Martin was actually the favoured candidate. So to me, that's a bit strange for that sort of thing going to the media. Now, we don't know. Maybe that was all just paper talk, just press talk, just kind of clickbait, trying to sell people type of things. So we don't really know what's going on and who's been interviewed or who's not been interviewed, or if they've potentially had other candidates that they preferred over Martin. But the one thing I'll say is that, if he was the favoured candidate, then, they've got their man. And at the end of the day, I suppose that all that really matters at this stage. I think you can both look at it as a positive and a negative that it's taken as long as it has done. I think you can say that, at least they were thorough. If they have interviewed other candidates, at least you can say it's been a really thorough and a really robust process. But on the flip side of that, you could also probably say, normally clubs of our size, they've got their main man in mind and they just go and get him. Whereas we appear to have interviewed, maybe 3, 4 or 5 candidates. And that may be a consequence of the fact that there wasn't a structure in place around a manager. This, aside from the takeover itself, there wasn't really a director of football or anybody above a manager. Niles Coughlan was in a kind of technical director role, but he's obviously since been kind of moved on. Kevin Thelwell's just came in the door, so he's maybe not had a chance to put in place that structure. But I would hope that going forward, that there should always be somebody above the manager whose job it is at any moment at any football club to say, right, if the manager leaves for whatever circumstances, whether he does really well and he moves on, a la Steven Gerrard, or we have to relieve him of his duties, there should be somebody above that manager that's always basically looking for the next one in the door. And I think, to me, that's one of Kevin Thelwell's main jobs. I know it seems a bit silly to talk about that since we've just appointed a manager, but for me, we should always be looking at the next potential one.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that, and I think that should run throughout the entire club in terms of the playing staff, but also, obviously, it isn't going to be Kevin Thelwell to do this, but we should almost have earmarked or pinpointed the next Kevin Thelwell if there is need for a change or he decides to move or whatever. So I think the whole club should now be running in that fashion, and I've good. It's early days, but I've good feelings that it will start to run more professionally and efficiently like that. So fingers crossed that is the case. Scott, we're not going to spend too much time talking about why, the whys and why shouldn't you appoint them, because at the end of the day, he's appointed, he's there, and he has, from my full backing for one now, he's a Rangers manager, and I'm sure it speaks for the both of you as well. But let's just talk about one of the things, which was, I heard a lot of this talk about when he was a player at Rangers, just because I'm trying to find a nice way of saying this, but that basically because he wasn't winning any Ballon d'Ors, shall we say, while he was a player, that was a reason not to be bringing him back as manager. For me, that's totally irrelevant. I don't see whether, if even, and I equally don't see that if he was a wonderful player for us. I mean, Alan McCoist was a brilliant goal scorer for us, but it didn't make him the right man to manage us long term. What do you think on that?
No, like that's the thing. Like, see, when I was judging Russell Martin, it was just solely as a manager. I couldn't care less the fact that he was a bad player for us. He acknowledged that as well. That's another thing I really like about him. Very simple way. He acknowledged the fact that I wasn't like good for you, but just don't judge me as a player. Judge me as a manager. So yeah, I think that's totally irrelevant. But obviously, you have got some Rangers fans that have that kind of bad taste in their mouths about Martin because he was poor. But the thing is, though, he was in a poor team. Everyone was poor back then. Like it was like probably no, not probably. It was the worst Rangers team in the top flight ever, like hands down. So no, like I'm. Yeah, like obviously that's the thing. I think Russell Martin, obviously, as a manager, he does have some flaws, right? When you look at obviously Joby done at Southampton, yeah, he got promoted. He did. That was the aim. They did have one of the biggest budgets in that league. But the only thing that really does concern me is the fact that he's very stubborn with his philosophy. So he is, and he's one of those guys that's like, if plan A isn't working, do plan A better. And we've seen what happened in the Premier League, where obviously it was a car crash. 1 win in 16 league games. Martin was very stubborn, didn't change his system. Then he obviously got the sack, but he did say he's learned a lot since then. So yeah, like I'm very interested. Obviously, we'll get into it, but I'm very interested about like style of play, right? Because Rangers fans for a long time have been moaning we need a manager with a style of play, right? We've got a manager with a style of play. Oh no, it's like no, we don't want that style of play. And it's like, come on, like what do you want, man? So but it's going to be like in terms of the transfer market as well. You will get backed. We just need to get the right players for this system. But in terms of Europe, I think we can say goodbye to the iconic European run because I don't think we're going to do all that well if he's going to play that kind of system.
Listen, I for one enjoy the European runs. They're great, but I want Rangers to be dominating domestically again. So if we go out in the round of 16 or whatever of Europe, but it means that we win a double or a treble, or a league, just I'm all for that. Now is the time for we need to be Kings of Scotland again on a regular basis.
Definitely.
And yeah, so that's the most important thing without a doubt. Brian, although Scott and myself don't feel that his time as a player is relevant in terms of whether he should be a manager or not, do you feel it works the other way in terms of do you feel there's any advantage gained from the fact that he's been at the club, he's been in the league, albeit briefly, um, but he has experienced it, he's experienced the fan base, he's experienced the expectations. Given again they've grown, they will have grown with more realistic chances now. But do you think there's an advantage to be gained there?
I think potentially, yeah. I think it should mean that he's not surprised by the pressure that he'll be under as manager. He knows what he's walking into. He's played in front of a full house Ibrox. He knows the demands of the fans. So none of that will come a shock to him. And if you look at other potential candidates that were in the running, mainly Ancelotti, he was walking in completely cold. The Scottish football, he wouldn't have had any first-hand experience of the league. He wouldn't have had any first-hand experience of us as a club in terms of the pressure that comes along with it. Whereas Russell Martin, he knows that. So that's probably one of the advantages that Martin would have had over a candidate like Ancelotti, is that knowledge of knowing the league and knowing the demands of the club. So that can only be a bonus. And I think it is, as Scott was saying, it's a good thing that he's kind of acknowledging that, he basically wasn't a great player for us. Let's not, dress it up. He wasn't, and he acknowledges that himself. And I think again that kind of speaks positively to his character, that he's not shy of coming out and saying, look, I know I wasn't a good player for years, but that's kind of irrelevant to what he's going to do as a manager. As a manager, he's got a philosophy and he's made no bones about the fact that he's going to come and implement that philosophy. So I think one of the biggest things we need to do, and we'll probably get onto this, is recruitment. It's all very well him coming in with a velocity, but we need to give him the players that can play the way he wants to play. There's no point him coming in to implement this style of football if we're not able to give him the players that are capable of playing that way.
Yeah, there's no point in setting them up. You're setting them up for failure at that point, aren't you? I'll stick with you, Brian. So on the style of play, let's get on to the style of play. Is it a major thing for you that it is attractive football? There's no doubt about that. He's played good football at Swansea. Again, I didn't see much of MK Dons, so I can't say. Southampton, particularly in that championship season, played good football. We want to win and we need to win. But the thing that's impressed me in terms of how he was talking at the press conference was, the brush that he's been hit with all the time with Southampton and when it was going wrong was, oh, he's obsessed with his style of play and he won't change and stuff. Whether he's learned from that or that wasn't necessarily true. I don't know, but when he was talking, yes, we will be implementing this style of play, but the most important thing is that we win at first. And the style of play will come, but we need to win. So that impressed me. But does the style of play and does the fact that the club sought out a manager with a style of play, does that matter to you?
Like for me, like we all love to watch good attacking football, right? Be lying to say if we didn't, right? But first and foremost, I want to win. And I don't really want Rangers to be one of those clubs or become one of those clubs. Like, for example, West Ham. You always hear about West Ham fans talking about playing the West Ham way. And it's like, yeah, that's all right, very well and good, but show me your medals. And for me, the bottom line of Rangers is when you win trophies. And that's kind of all that matters. That's kind of the long and short of it. To me, Rangers exists to win trophies. And that's how any manager should view it. Now, if he can come in and do that, playing really good attacking football, great, I'm all for it. But first and foremost, he has to win. And it was interesting. I caught a clip of an interview with him I think he was on Monday Night Football. And I think Jamie Carragher basically asked him, kind of, what have you learned? What had you learned your time in the Premier League? What would you maybe do differently? And he did say, look, if I had my time again, I would focus more on being difficult to beat, on the dark arts. And I was quite impressed to hear him say that because it shows that, he's maybe reflected on it and he's maybe thought to himself, maybe I did place too much emphasis on this so-called style of play. And at the end of the day, it's great having a style of play and it shows that the club is modernising. The fact that we've clearly identified the style of play that we want, and we've went out and recruited a manager that is, known for that style of play. It shows that this is the direction we're going in, and I think it's key that his title is head coach and not manager. I know it's, terminology, and to some people it maybe doesn't mean a lot, but I actually think it's, a key indicator of the modernisation of the club. The manager is no longer the godfather of the club, a la Walter Smith or Sir Alex Ferguson. It's the head coach. His main job is on the grass, training Monday to Friday and on a Saturday at 3 o'clock. That's where his main focus is. Yes, he'll get a say in recruitment. It's not like players are just going to turn up at the training ground and he'll be told, right, you work with these players, go and make it work. Of course, he'll get a say, but he's no longer flying here, there, and everywhere, a la Michael Beale, meeting players and looking into the whites of their eyes, as Michael Beale would say. That's not really his role. And he's not negotiating contracts or, anything like that. His job is on the training pitch, pick the team on a Saturday and get them winning. And if he can do that with this free-flowing style of play that we all hope, then I'm all for it.
Yep. Why wouldn't you be? Scott, on the style of play, so there obviously is the positives that it is easy on the eye, and it's at the end of the day, winning is the most important, obviously, but it's an entertainment business too, and we have not been entertained watching Rangers for a long time, unfortunately. So it is that's obviously is a bonus. But on the other hand, he can see his teams concede a lot of goals. That's a concern for me. How big a concern is it for yourself?
Well, not as big as other people have it. Where, for me, no, it's right. He's coming up with Scottish football. It's not like he's going to be manager a team in the Championship or the Premier League, right? We all know the standard of Scottish football isn't great. So, and of course, there has been some concerns about the fact he can't break down a low block. We'll just need to wait and see. But he just needs to get the right players in. But obviously, he does score a lot of goals, but obviously, he does concede quite a few as well. But yeah, obviously, like just going back to what I said earlier on, or even touching on what Brian said, where obviously when he was on Monday Night Football with Jamie Carragher, he said that, yeah, I would have done things differently. And he mentioned about the dark arts as well. So I don't think he's going to come up here with just right with the mindset of right, if plan A isn't working, do plan A better. He's actually going to adapt, which he has to. He has to. And I feel like in Europe, hopefully, fingers crossed, right? Fingers crossed, in Europe, if we're going to like Liverpool away or whatever, he's not going to try and go toe-to-toe possession based with him because he's going to lose that. But no, it's not really all that big of a concern because that's the thing. One thing in his style of play is the fact that in his style of play, his team always looks for the spare man, right? And I think, for example, Dessers, I think Dessers can play that role really well because Dessers' movement is good, just not when he's offside sometimes. But yeah, I think Dessers is one player that could fit into that system. And then obviously you got James Tavernier as well. He's played in a very similar system, obviously under Warburton in the Championship. And that's the thing, his system can work. I do believe in it. He just needs to get the right players, that's it. And I'm very confident he will get those right players because obviously I think we'll probably spend about 20 to 25 million this summer. Because see, obviously a lot of people have been saying, "Oh, it's only just £20 million going in." That's just first investment. More money will go in. So yeah, I'm confident that he will get the right players. But the only concern is, I feel like a lot of them might be from the Championship because Martin's only ever played and managed in Britain. So that's my only concern. Because I do feel like we will go for a lot of Championship players. I've seen a lot of people mention Joe Aribo potentially coming back because obviously Martin managed them. I personally wouldn't want that. I don't want us to keep going back the way. Obviously Joe Aribo's a great player for us, but no, I think we need to move on from that. It kind of reminds me of every transfer window when Ryan Kent's a free agent. Oh, bring him home. No, just no. Good player, but no. So yeah, he will get a lot of money to spend, and he will be supported. Obviously, he's got a good team around him, and as Brian touched on, it's not like he's going to be doing a Michael Beale flying over to Italy or wherever trying to get players. So he just needs to mainly focus on coaching the team, implementing that philosophy, and then obviously the director of football will cover everything else. So I think it is promising. I'm trying to be as positive as I can because I'm a positive guy in general. But yeah, I think we could be onto a winner here with Martin.
Yeah, no, I can't disagree with what you're saying there. Brian, does it matter to you right now? Obviously, right now it doesn't matter. The backroom staff is obviously a skeleton staff at the minute, and there will be additions. Does that matter to you? Would you like to see it more? A manager coming in and having it more set in stone. Now, obviously, he has Gills, I think, is his assistant, and then he has one fitness, strength and conditioning coach. But other than that, there's nobody at the minute. Does that matter? Obviously, the players aren't there at the minute, and preseason hasn't even started. So what is that important? But also, would you like to see? There's been talk of Mo Ross, but would you like to see somebody who's been at the club? Martin's been there, but not for long. And gets. Do we need a Rangers man, basically?
I don't think we need a Rangers man per se. I just think we need good coaches. Now, from what I've heard, Maurice Ross is a good coach. I've heard a few podcast people talking about him, and they speak very highly of his time at Motherwell in terms of a coach. So for me, it should be coaching ability above all else. I'm not really too hung up on whether they're a Rangers man and they can thump the chest and thump the badge. I don't really think that plays as big a role anymore as it maybe did in years gone past. I think for me, it's all about their ability as a coach, and I think you're saying that. I think it actually is important that we get the whole coaching setup kind of fleshed out as soon as possible because the reality is the players are back training 2 weeks on Monday. Now that's not a long time, and we've got coaching positions to be filled. I think they need a new goalkeeping coach. There's probably some other coaching positions to be filled, and we also need to start signing some players as well. And those players that are signing, they're going to want to know the coaching staff they're working with. It's all very well saying, yeah, Russell Martin's the manager, but who's taking the sessions? Does Russell Martin see a hands-on coach that takes the sessions, or is he going to have guys round about him that take the sessions, or is it a case of some guys work with certain sections of the team? You get defensive coaches, or guys that work with the strikers, or coaches that work with the midfielders. So they're going to want to know that kind of setup. So I do think it's important that we get that nailed down as soon as possible, and that's kind of where the structure comes into play that Kevin Thelwell's putting in place. In an ideal world, we have the structure around the head coach, and the head coach is almost interchangeable. If it doesn't work out, head coach leaves, another one comes in. If it does work out, the head coach goes elsewhere because he's been coached by a bigger league. Another one comes in that structure in terms of fitness coaches, physios, goalkeeping coaches sort of remain the same. So if we can get to that point as quickly as possible, then I think that will only be a positive.
Yeah, that's fair. Scott, you were impressed as was I with the press conference, with how Russell Martin spoke. I can see why. Obviously, there's reports for the last few weeks that he interviewed very well, and I can see why he interviewed very well. I think he handled the questions really excellently. I don't think he put a foot wrong in it, and he certainly impressed me. I'm not going to do this where Michael Beale came in and he spoke well initially. Clement for a while, I was like lapping up everything he was saying. I'm not going to totally go on that and say, oh, he's the man, he's the man. But so far, you can really judge on what he said, and he has been impressive. What has impressed you so much? Because I know you initially had your reservations, like many others, and you seem to have really gone full circle on it.
I think just mainly because I'll probably say how honest he is. Yeah, just how honest he is, and he's one of those guys who just doesn't beat around questions or just give you like a BS answer. He'll just tell you straight, and that's what I found really impressive about him. And as you touched on, like obviously his interview, like I can see why he wowed that board. Like I can really see why. So yeah, that's what's really impressed me, and the fact that he's just, as going back to what I said as well, he's very self-aware, very likable. And obviously, I've heard the reports that he's a fantastic man manager, and I think that's exactly what we need. Because obviously, I heard stuff that Clement was not a good man manager at all, and obviously Michael Beale was a terrible man manager, and Russell Martin's like the type of guy where he's honest, he'll tell you straight, but he's doing it to benefit you. He's doing it to benefit the team, and that's what we need. We need someone like that. And obviously, I don't think he's a type of guy that's just going to be a complete lunatic or give players the hair dryer treatment. He's just going to be just tell them straight. So that's what's really impressed me. Where I can just yeah, I think we're on to a winner here because he's just got something about him, just something about him. And obviously, just going back to as well where he's not afraid of tough questions. You obviously seen that in the press conference yesterday, and he also acknowledged the fact that I probably wasn't the first choice. Every club I've been at, I was never the first choice. All I need to do is just try and prove people wrong. So I actually do think Gerrard originally was the first choice. And also we heard some reports that the reason he never took the job on was because because of tax reasons, or apparently his missus doesn't want to come back to Scotland. Because Alan McCoy actually was on TalkSport. He said he spoke to Gerrard about it. He was like, yeah, it just wasn't the right time. So I think that might have been the reason. But yeah, like Martin is just he's ticking all the boxes so far, but he needs to do it in the pitch.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I felt the same about the press conference. Brian, if there's anything that you'd like to add on the press conference or that impressed you or that didn't, feel free. But also, on this style of play within our current squad right now, who do you feel can adapt to this style of play? Who do you think he can get the best out of? Yeah.
Go back to the press conference. I feel like I've maybe been burned before with kind of praising managers too much for their first press conferences. I remember sitting on a podcast with Alex during the 2022 World Cup when Michael Beale was unveiled, and we were both kind of waxing lyrical about how great it was that he was so honest and open, and what a great first press conference, and we both loved it, and look how that turned out. So I'm trying not to judge too much on the first press conference. I think regardless of kind of what he said, he was almost always going to come across well. I do think it was interesting that it did seem to be a bit more of a low-key kind of unveiling than years gone past. There wasn't the full press in the blue room treatment, and it was very much a kind of 8 a.m. announcement and then press conference at 11 a.m. pretty quickly. So I wonder if that tells you something. It's more about, to me, that the signal they were sending out was, here's the new head coach, but we know there's still a lot of work to do, so let's get to work. There wasn't the kind of fanfare and things like that as much. So I think they were kind of sending out signals of, yes, this is, the first decision we had to make, but it's only the first of many, and there's still plenty of work to do. So it'll be interesting to see over the coming weeks. I expect, hopefully more announcements of players potentially. And in terms of going on to players and looking at the current squad, it was interesting. He did say that he's kind of open to being surprised by, the current players. He's not came in and immediately said, we need a whole new squad. I think he's kind of making noises that he's happy to see what's there initially and see who he can work with. And he's also acknowledged that there will be areas that will need strengthening. But I think it's going to be interesting because I've heard a few Southampton journalists talk about this, famed style of play. And the one thing they all seem to mention is the goalkeeper is key. They've all kind of said that he treats the goalkeeper as a third centre back. And I don't know about you, but Jack Butland doing that role kind of fills me with a bit of fear. So I wonder if potentially that might. I know we were all, for a lot of Rangers fans, were kind of thinking along the lines of a new goalkeeper in the summer anyway, because Butland's coming off a pretty poor season by his standards. But I wonder if, to implement this style of play, if the goalkeeper might be one of the first positions that Martin looks at. And kind of ironic, because I think it was probably one of the first positions that Mark Warburton looked at when he brought in Foderingham, who he's seen as a goalkeeper that could play that style of play. So it'll be interesting to see if that is a position that he can that he strengthens. In terms of other players and positions, I think centre half is definitely an area that needs strengthened. I think John Souttar's a good siege defender. I think I would definitely have him in and around the squad and the team. I'm not sure if he's one that's capable of taking the ball under pressure. I think Martin's systems generally like to do the splitting the centre halves kind of thing and having them play out from the back. I'm not sure if that's entirely his game, so it'll be interesting to see what part he plays. I think, as Scott says, Tavernier's played in a similar system before, so I think he could adapt quite well to it. The only maybe caveat I would say is he's not the Tavernier of 10 years ago or whenever it was when he arrived and he played that system. So how much does that affect his game? He's probably not going to be the rampaging right back we've seen score all those goals. He's maybe a slightly different player now. I'm not one for throwing the baby out with the bathwater and saying, get rid of Tav, strip him with the captaincy. All this, I don't think that's necessary. I think he still has a part to play. I think he's still got quality, to be honest. He's still, if we get a free kick outside the opponent's box, there's probably nobody else I would want on that other than Tav. But I do think we need to start planning for life at Rangers without James Tavernier in the not too distant future. I know as much as it's going to upset you, Scott, but it is, unfortunately, father time waits for no man, and it is going to catch up with him. But I'm not one for just saying, right, get rid, strip him with the captaincy, get rid. I think he still has a part to play. I think Jeffrey could actually do really well in this system as a left back. If what I understand of Martin's system is, he likes to use his full backs high and wide. I think Jeffrey could really be a real key component of that. And the last one I'll say is I think Raskin could thrive in that kind of deep line midfield role as the kind of pivot in the midfield three, assuming he stays. Hopefully he stays. I think he could be a real key component. I think I was listening to a Southampton journalist and he said that Martin likes his midfield to have kind of one pivot and then two kind of number eights kind of bombing on, attacking the box. And I think Raskin could do that role of kind of playing that deep line playmaker quite well.
Yeah, that's fair. No, I think I agree with you completely in terms of I think it's a final nail in the coffin for Jack Butland. Hope if he stays, hopefully he proves me wrong. But him playing that role is absolutely terrifying. No, I agree completely. Scott, anyone other than Brian's? You touched on Dessers earlier as well, but other than the Brian's mentioned that you feel can adapt to this new style of play.
I actually think Diomande could adapt. I think he could adapt actually. I actually think there is a player in Diomande. Obviously he is young. He's in the league. He was quite inconsistent, but he was one of our best players in Europe. So I think Diomande could be a player who could maybe thrive in Russell Martin's system. And obviously touching on Jeffy as well, what Brian said, yeah, absolutely agree. Jeffy, he's another one as well. He's raw, but you can see the potential. And Conor Barron, do you think he could thrive in that system? Because obviously he's another player. Technically, he's not the best, but he's a proper engine in that midfield. So I don't know about Conor Barron. There's a big question mark over that. But just touching on Dessers as well, I think Dessers could really thrive in that system. It would be very interesting to see how Igaman does in that system as well. And that's if we keep him, of course, because I've got a bad feeling he might be off in the summer because obviously he's going to be playing in one of the top 5 leagues in the next year or two. He's a real talent. So there are players in that team, like obviously mentioning Tavernier, that can play in that system. But obviously he'll probably bring in my opinion, maybe about 7, 8 more players. But Butland, no, I think he'll be off. He's in his final year of his contract. He's been terrible for a long time, and I hate saying that because Jack Butland's a stand-up guy. He really is. I like him a lot, but he cost Rangers so many points last season, so many points, and I just feel like he went off the wagon right after he never got called up to England when Southgate went up to obviously Ibrox. He said like, "What's the hype with Butland?" And then he concedes 3 goals, and yeah, I think Butland will be off. I think we will be getting a new keeper. There's been talk of Angus Gunn. No sure how I feel about that. Apparently he's playing for Scotland tonight, and last time I checked, Iceland have beaten Scotland 2-1. I don't know if that's still the score, but Angus Gunn doesn't fill me with any excitement. But obviously we need to get a keeper and that can actually play and fit into Martin's system. And like obviously I've never been a fan of like obviously goalkeepers just passing it out from the back, but it's a modern game now. Every manager in the dug are doing it.
Yeah.
Another interesting player that I just thought about there, Ben, was I was listening to another Southampton journalist, and he made mention that Martin really likes to play with wingers, and I actually thought about Oscar Cortez. Could Martin be the one to get the best out of him? If his system is all about playing with pace out wide, we know Cortez has got that. We've seen it in his first few games here when he arrived. He's been really unfortunate with injury, and I know people have been critical of the club for kind of tying themselves into this deal, but that's kind of done now. We need to try and get something out of him because he can be an asset if we can get the injuries cleared up and get him playing and get him confident. Then I think he can be a player that could thrive. If we remember when Warburton came in, and Barry Mackay was kind of out in the cold. He'd been out on loan. He hadn't really got a game under McCoist. And Warburton was the one to get the best out of Mackay. In a kind of similar type of way, where I'm thinking Martin could get the best out of Cortez. And actually the same way, if you remember at the time, when Warburton first came in, he actually played Mackay and Templeton, he's just 2 wingers. Initially, until Templeton got injured. And Templeton was playing really well at the beginning until that injury. So if I'm thinking that the styles are going to be similar, then I think Cortez could be one to benefit.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point. I mean, it's kind of in the same way. We would prefer right now that we weren't in this obligation to buy. Similarly, there are those out there that would prefer that we went for another managerial candidate, but we are where we are, and it's the same with Cortez. And to be honest, Cortez hasn't shown enough. But when you think about it from his point of view, he's a young boy. He's in a completely different country and culture. What he looks just completely bereft of confidence. What he needs is somebody to put the arm around him and to say, "Listen, I believe in you," and to build him back up again. He's had the injuries as well, so we have him now, so we may as well try and get the best out of him. It's as simple as that. But he needs somebody to believe in him. That's what he looks like right now. At the end of the day, there's a player there. There's no doubt that there's a player there, but we just need to consistently see him on the pitch and see that player. So fingers crossed that Russell Martin is the man to be able to do that in this coaching staff. And Brian, I'll stick with you now. And you kind of touched on this point earlier. The manager has always been, and he's a head coach now, so I keep saying manager, but the manager has always been the most important person at the football club. Now, and I think that still is the case, but to a certain extent, right now, is Kevin Thelwell's job almost more important because the manager has this clear sense of identity, of style, of what he wants to do. But if Kevin Thelwell cannot produce the players for him, the players aren't there right now. So is his role at this present minute more important than the manager? Wouldn't matter who the manager is.
At the minute, yes, because at the minute we are closely approaching pre-season training starting in 2 weeks' time, and we need players in. So it's vital that Kevin Thelwell gets those players in, and yeah, we get the players that Martin needs, and crucially the players that are capable of playing the way Martin wants to play. So at the minute, yes, Thelwell's probably the most important role at the club, and potentially that's how it's going to be because, like I was saying, in my head the structure should be that the head coaches are almost, come and go. Either they do really well and they probably go to the Premier League, or they don't do so well and we need to replace them. And that structure should always remain the same, and it should be Thelwell's job to almost always have an eye on the next one in, because you just never know when either your manager's going to get poached or, results take a turn for the worst and we, have to be looking for a new manager. But yeah, pre-season's fast approaching, and I'll say this now because I know that everybody always says, "Oh, pre-season doesn't matter. Results in pre-season aren't important." The last few pre-seasons we've had have been an absolute shambles, and the season that's followed has been an absolute shambles. So for me, pre-season is important. Um, in pre-season you can build confidence with results, and good results in pre-season can follow into a season. So for me, I'm not going to be here sitting going, if we get beat 3-0, all of our games, I'm not going to be sitting going, "Oh, it's only pre-season. It doesn't really matter." For me, pre-season does matter because a good pre-season, as we've seen in the UE 155, we had a really good pre-season that year. I know it was in COVID conditions, but we had a really fantastic pre-season that year, and that gave us the initial spark to kick off the season on a winning run. So I'm looking for us to go into pre-season, and yes, I'm looking to see, the kind of embers of the style of play and the kind of starting of that. But I'm also looking for us to build a bit of confidence and get some wins.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. I think it is important that we get momentum and belief into this team. The next question that I'm going to ask you is both the same question. Scott, I'm going to start with yourself. So you are Russell Martin, okay, and it's day one proper of the job. You've done all the media obligations, the unveil, and all that stuff. What are your first three priorities within the job? What are you asking for? What are you doing? And please don't say gift having your new 10-year contract, Scott.
That's a good question. Well, first of all, obviously, just want to touch on what Brian said. I think this is our most important pre-season in years. So, purely because he needs to implement the style of play. So that'll be one, implement the style of play. Two, obviously, identify all the transfer targets, don't mess about. And three, I would probably, three would be just get rid of the deadwood as well. That's the three things you have to do because there is a lot of deadwood at that club. Obviously, Proper's going to be going to 20, I think. So obviously, I think we will see a good number of players leave because they simply have to. Danilo will be off. I think he's been an absolute flop, if I'm being totally honest. £5 million and barely fit. I don't think he's a bad player, but he's just not worth the money. Yilmaz will be off. 100%. He's just been a flop as well. So we will be seeing a lot of players go. And I'll probably say those are the three things. But I think most importantly is that the style of play needs to implement that he needs to get players in who understand it and players who are already there that he's going to keep to understand it. Because I think Brian does make a good point. Because see, if we stick the joint out in this pre-season, that will concern me going into obviously league campaign because that will just show me that these players aren't buying into his philosophy, and that would be a disaster. That would be a disaster. So I'm quite worried about that. But obviously, I think we will be in good hands. We will be in good hands with Martin because he'll identify the players that he knows what players he's going to get, and obviously he's got that good relationship with the director of football. Where it's not like the director of football is going to be overruling him. They're both going to collab with each other, and that's what you want. So yeah, I'm feeling optimistic, Ben. I'm feeling very optimistic. But yeah, we need to get this pre-season right. And honestly, I don't think any of us really care about pre-season. But this one, I will be because see, if we have a fantastic pre-season, I think everyone will be feeling really optimistic going into the season, and there'll be a real positive vibe, and that's what we need right now.
Yep, absolutely. So same question to yourself, Brian.
Yeah, I think for me, he's got to use this time that he's got now, the next 2 weeks where the players aren't there. They've got to use this time to get his coaching staff sorted, get all that in place and ready for start of pre-season, and even just things like, going around the training ground. Is there facilities in the training ground that need upgraded? We heard when Gerrard came in that he did a lot of changing in the training ground and the canteen and all that sort of stuff, and those are the kind of, when you talk about the standards that Gerrard set, those are the kind of small marginal gains that you can get, and you just wonder, have those types of things slipped over the years, and is that maybe something where he's going around and looking at the training ground facilities and saying, well, maybe this could do with being upgraded, or we could change how we do this specific thing in the training ground or whatever. So those types of things that we probably don't see or hear about a lot, but even just that extra wee 1% of doing something like that. I remember when Arne Slot came into Liverpool, one of the things he did was he implemented some new coffee room in the Liverpool training centre where all the players could get together and kind of, yeah, as a group, and even just small kind of daft stuff like that people probably don't think make a difference on a Saturday, but even just those little 1% gains that you can get by those kind of small tweaks can make a difference over the course of the season. So the first thing I think he needs to do is use the time that he's got now wisely whilst the players aren't in the building. If there's things that need doing behind the scenes, get them done, get the coaching staff in place, get the plan in place for pre-season. We already know we're going to St George's Park, I think, for the training camp. I think it's actually a good thing that we're not travelling too far this season. Hopefully they can save the trip to San Francisco for next year for our pre-season. But I think it's going to be a good thing that we're kind of staying local, but get all that set up and then just really hit the ground running in pre-season. And yeah, if we can do that, then that should set us up for a good season.
Okay. And just as we can, just to wrap things up, basically tonight we'll very quickly touch on a couple of the rumours that have been doing the rounds to do with mainly one out and a few ins. So I'll just very quickly give you one each, and you can tell me your thoughts on them. So Scott, the first one that seems to be gathering a wee bit of pace is Diamonde to Everton. Now I agree with yourself that there's a player in there. I like him, and I think he's getting better. I would like him to stay. However, obviously everybody has their price. So on that, what is his price? What do you let them go
Because
for?
so obviously because he is young, right, and as we've obviously touched on, there is talent there. I would probably say, I don't think I'm crazy saying this, we could probably get 4 or 5 million for him, I think. 4 or 5 million. Because obviously, they touched on it in the press conference. Patrick Stewart said that Rangers are a selling club. That's what we are. We're a selling club, and our player trading model has been abysmal over the years, right? Celtic's one's phenomenal. I hate saying that. Our player trading model has been abysmal. So obviously, we will see some players go for good money in the summer. So I would probably say about 4 or 5 million. But I just want to touch on this as well. Actually, Dessers, obviously, there's been rumblings that some other clubs in Europe are interested in him. We could probably get. I think we could probably get 5 million for him because obviously had a good season last season, finished SPFL top goal scorer, and yeah, I do. I've kind of like changed my opinion on Dessers. I like him, but if we do get a good offer, we need to jump at it because 5 million for someone like Dessers at that age, 31, need to jump on it. So, Diomande, if Everton are interested and the offer is 4 or 5 million, go for it. Absolutely go for it.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. I mean, just on Dessers, I mean, I'm not letting him go for less than 5 million. Um, he's had 50 goals in 2 seasons. At the end of the day, if you told me I was saying this 6 months ago, I'd have laughed. But like at the end of the day, you should be getting your money back on him. But Brian, just on Diamonde very quickly, 4 to 5 million. I mean, I think Scott's really low there.
Yeah.
That's basically what we paid, and to be honest with you, I'm not letting him go for short of 11.
Yeah, I would say anything north of 10, and I would be doing business at that, but nothing less than that, to be honest. And I think it's kind of like you say, there's nobody in this squad that's untouchable. There's nobody that for the right price, I wouldn't, shake their hand and wish them well. I wouldn't be actively looking to sell Diamande. I wouldn't necessarily be touting them about, but if Everton came in and put 10 million down on the table, let's do business at that. And I think that's just, we need to get comfortable as a support now that we're going to sell our best players. I know a lot of supporters will want to hear it. It's something we're not used to, but I would rather that than letting guys that, like Alfredo Morelos, who had at a point in time had an £18 million valuation, walk out the door for absolutely nothing. We need to learn some serious lessons from that because I think that summer where we let Morelos, Kent, Barisic all go for nothing, I think that's still it's crippling us to today because when they were at their peak value, we could have made some proper money on them and that could have funded a proper squad overhaul. So yeah, I think we need to get comfortable with the fact that our best players are going to leave, but they have to leave on our terms and when the price is right. I'm not for selling players on the cheap. I think we did that last summer with the likes of Cantwell and things like that. We let them go far too cheaply. I think now we know why we did that. We were clearly clearing the decks in terms of wages for the takeover, trying to make the club as marketable as possible. I think there was probably people in the behind the scenes working it. I think Dave King's said as much. So I guess that makes a bit more sense now, but that can't be a strategy going forward. We need to start selling players at the right time and on our terms.
No, I agree with you. I mean, I think as fans, of course, we always focus on the ends and want to see these ends, but and that's how we kind of judge the club, and that's how we judge Delwell, for example. But I think they need to be judged equally and as importantly on how they sell our players. And we've talked about this training model for so long. We need to start seeing it regularly working for the club and valuing our players right. Is an important thing for that. So just on the rest now, we're gonna focus on
Oh, Ben, so
potential.
can I just respond to
Yeah,
what
yeah,
you said there about Diamandis? So the reason I said 4 or 5 million, just purely because, like, he's in the league, as I said, he's been very inconsistent, right? But obviously done very well in Europe. So I'm thinking, right, obviously, if Everton are going to come in for him, I think that's probably the figure they'll want to go for, and they'll be like, yeah, okay, he is young, but look at his league form. He's not been great in the league for years, and obviously he hasn't won anything yet. So obviously, I would love to get more, but that's probably just my guess. How maybe some like clubs out there that kind of like value him at that kind of fee. But obviously, I would personally like to keep him. But obviously, if we get the right offer, you'll need to go.
yeah,
On
and I think
Diamande specifically, though, I think he could actually be one of the players that improves the most under Martin. Because if you think about Diamande when he first came in, he scored in his first 2 or 3 games when he
yeah, he
scored
does.
in,
Yeah,
and we've never really seen that from him since. And I think if he has one of those roles in the midfield three as one of the number eights that's attacking the box, we could see that from him again in terms of those numbers because he's clearly got it in his locker as he showed. It was maybe just the way that Clermont seemed to be deploying him that just didn't really suit him. I didn't feel so. I think if we get one more season out of him and he has a really good season, then again potentially this time next summer that pushes his value up even more.
yeah. No, that's aligned with my thinking really. And I think Scott, just to finish off on it, I think the fact that it is Everton, Premier League clubs, what's 4 to 5 million to them? They don't buy players for 4 to 5 million. So I think if it's a Premier League club generally coming in, you can't squeeze that extra 1 2 million out of them, on what they want to pay, because they have it and more. But Brian, one rumor that kind of hasn't that seems to be still there and sticking around is and his first name is totally escaping me, but the boy Mulligan from Dundee is rumored to be coming in. Is he a player that you would like to see coming in on a free transfer?
I'll be honest, I don't know an awful lot about him. I don't watch an awful lot of Dundee, but what I would say is these types of deals, I think we need to do more of picking up the best talent from your Dundees, your St Mirrens, your Motherwells, these types of teams that we've done in the past. And if we can do it on a free, then all the better. I think that's something that seems to have been acknowledged within the club that we need to start doing that more, picking up the best talents in the league. We've got. I think people sometimes forget that we've already got a player in the door in Lyle Cameron who's coming in, and I think he's a really exciting prospect as well. So it'll be interesting to see how Russell Martin uses him. But yeah, for me, free transfer, low risk. I don't see why not. At worst, if it didn't work out, you would make something back on.
Yeah, no, for what it's worth, he's a player that again I haven't seen a whole lot of Dundee, but he's a player that I've liked the look of. Be it against us or in the derbies is the only time that I end up really watching Dundee. But I do think there's a player in there. I think he's good on the ball. So I think there's and I think there's potential there to grow. And again, on a free transfer, if it doesn't work out, I think you can get him a move back into another SPL team. And make a wee bit of money on him. So yeah, I'd be all in for that one. Scott, another one that I've seen quite a bit of, and I think I'll know your answer to this, but uh, whether it's realistic or not is the other thing. Is Jamie Vardy on a free transfer, 38 years old, but still was scoring goals in the Premier League last season. I mean, would you take him?
Absolutely, absolutely. Jamie Vardy, he's a very good player. It's not like he's washed, and as you said, like he scored a few goals last season in the Premier League in a very poor Leicester team. So obviously he'll come in, and I think if we do get him, he'll come in and probably play like a Jermaine Defoe role. And we all know how good Jermaine Defoe was for us. But my only concern is the fact that obviously Celtic linked with him as well, and he played under Brendan Rodgers. They've got a good relationship. So I think if he had to pick between Rangers and Celtic, Celtic obviously they won the league and whatnot, and they're probably more stable than us. No, they are more stable than us. You'd probably go there. But if you get the opportunity to get Jimmy Vardy, I'm all for it. I'm all for it, man. Because when you look at our strikers right now, Dessers, Igaman, Vardy, I don't know about you, but see having those three going out next season, I would be totally fine with that. Like, I think in every area in our team we need to get we need to strengthen in it, right? But I think in the striking department, if we get Vardy as well, I think we'll be totally fine. I don't think we need to go get another striker. So yeah, I'm 100% on board for Jimmy Vardy. We can probably get at least a season out of him because he keeps himself fit, and he knows what it's like to play in a poor league. Obviously, because he played in the National League, so playing in Scottish football with the physicality and whatnot will not phase a guy in the slightest. And he'll be a proper wind-up merchant as well. So yeah, I'm all for Jimmy Vardy. Hopefully, we can get him.
Yeah, I'd be for him as well. I would like to see him come in. I think he'll score goals in this league. I'll give the last one to you, Brian. One that I've seen today doing the rounds, and that's Connor Cody, centre back. Not a bad player. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, not a bad player. The only concern I would have around this, and it's something Scott touched on earlier, is I don't really want us going down the road of signing, English players that have once been good and are kind of on the way down. Like, I'm not, or players from the Premier League or the Championship that are kind of on the way down. I would rather we tried to cast our net a bit wider and looked at some of the European leagues to get some players from. I don't think it's worked for us in the past of going to the Championship or the Premier League and getting players that have got, something to prove, but are, let's be honest, their best years are probably behind them. So on Connor Cody specifically, he's a decent player. He could do a job up here. It just, as long as it's not a pattern of these are the types of players we're going to be bringing in. And I know I've heard a few people say that Russell Martin likes to sign players that he's previously worked with. So I
Yeah.
wonder if there might be a few players that have got previous connections to him signing almost as a to help him bed that philosophy in quicker. He brings in some players that are already, adapted to it and already know what it's about potentially. But again, I think that's got some risks with it as well. Um, so yeah, Connor Cody specifically, I wouldn't be massively against, but I just hope it's not a pattern.
Yeah, I mean, I think Phil will have a wider net than just the championship. Although obviously I know Martin will have the final say, but I'd like to think that his influences and experience will bring in players from elsewhere. I think Connor Cody as a replacement for Proper and or Balogun isn't bad and would fill that role within the squad. I still think we would obviously need more at centre back, but yeah. So that basically brings us to the end of the podcast tonight. So all's left for me is to say thank you to Brian for coming on.
Thank you.
And the same to yourself, Scott. Thank you. Um, and so basically, again, thank you to everyone who's been listening or watching the podcast tonight. We've been live on YouTube tonight, as always, and the podcast will be out on all the podcast platforms, also on your Spotify or Apple Podcasts and various places like that. Again, we would appreciate if you would share the podcast on your social medias. And again, I just please visit our forums as well for all your latest Rangers news and information as the summer and the window ramps up.